Sitting with yourself is the best advice I can give you. How do you know? You know because you listen to your own gut, because your mind will try and fool you at many times because the mind's archaic, but the gut sits within you. It's your internal compass. Always use it.
Frankie Lee, entrepreneur and podcaster. He was the youngest professional boxing trainer in the UK before starting his business working to protect some of the world's biggest celebrities and businesses from online trolls. In the last 5 years, he's also grown one of the largest podcasts to come out of the UK and Australia, interviewing some of the most famous people on the planet.
If you seek yourself first, the mentors will present themselves, but you first need to seek yourself and then the mentors will appear. Because many mentors, quote unquote, will appear in your life, but they're not all your mentors. They're not for you. They're not all for you. Because we can all go out and seek mentors and seek advice and seek guidance from all these different people, but now you're getting too many opinions. I said seek mentors, but first you need to seek yourself. Then I come to contentremoval.com and I realized, right, what did I learn? I'm thinking, before I start this business, what did I learn? Okay, well, I learned that I could try and sell to the bottom feeders in the world, like doing all that stuff, or I can go and sell to the top of town.
I've got a quick favour to ask you. Nearly 90% of people listening to this podcast right now don't follow or subscribe to us. And my goal is to get that down to 80%. So if you've ever liked an episode or a clip that we've put out, please could you click that follow or subscribe button. It helps us more than you know to bring more guests onto the podcast and put out better and better content for you. Thank you. Before we dive into this episode, I want to take a second to speak about our sponsor, Pith & Stem, who we are thrilled to have on this journey with us. As someone who is always looking for ways to improve my healthy hustle, Pith & Stem's drop-top desk stood out to me as the best full work-from-home solution on the market. The world of work from home is changing, and a laptop or screen perched on your lap or dining room table isn't enough anymore. It's imperative that we have a solution at home that matches our productivity station that we can have in our office. But of course, homes weren't made to be worked in, and not all of us want a dedicated study. That's why I'm so happy that Pith & Stem created this perfect solution. They designed this desk with both the needs of the professional and their home in mind. It's perfect because it allows me to have a full productivity station that suits my needs and helps me get the most out of every minute that I spend at it, not only so I work comfortably, but that I actually enjoy it. And the best thing about DropTop, I can close and lock it at the end of the day to keep work and home separate. And it looks awesome on the wall. You can get your DropTop desk anywhere in the world from pithandstem.com or just Google DropTop and you'll find it pretty quickly. So Frankie, you spend a lot of time talking to really big entrepreneurs around the world on your podcast. But I want to take you back to start with. I want to talk about your youth and your career when you started working. So you were the youngest professional and licensed boxing coach in the UK. How did you get into that, and what was the path in?
I think boxing for me came about as like, I was a hyperactive kid at school and I was going through all the motions, getting in all the trouble, and I kind of found boxing, and boxing was an outlet for me to go and express myself, to learn who I was. I think further on down the track, I understood that it was actually there to heal quite a few childhood wounds I had to overcome as well, which I'm sure we'll touch upon. But boxing for me was a great vehicle to get out of my own head, get out of my own mind, express myself, learn about life, and learn what actual life was. On from that era of life, I kind of went. You mentioned when I left school. I left school at like 16 years old, and I became a carpenter and joiner by trade. I just went along, just did the normal apprenticeship, and what school taught me was like, you go to, if you're not going to do sixth form, what are you going to do, Frankie? Well, you're going to go get an apprenticeship, you're going to work, you're going to save all your money, you're going to do the private jobs on the side, and when you finish your apprenticeship, you're going to buy a house, and then when you bought a house, you're going to pay that mortgage down as fast as possible. And that was a kind of the whole ethos of my childhood and the system that I was in, regardless of the fact of I went to quite a prestigious school in Peterborough. Regardless of that, the same system applied, whether you went to this school, which was King's School, or whether you went to a lower school that was less on the Ofsted report. They were all teaching the same principal system. So it's one of those things that when I speak on a lot of these podcasts, or I speak to a lot of people, we've all had to break out of a system essentially to even progress further,
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really interesting that when you look back now at the schooling system, it really is trying to make you go one way. And then if you say, I'm not going to go to uni or whatever, you immediately get segregated, don't you? And they take you down a different path. They think, okay, he's going to work with his hands, or he's going to go and do this or that. And it's going to be a lower level. And I think actually looking at the schooling system now, it doesn't work like that, because people who make the most value usually the ones that become bosses in the future by running their own companies.
It's the people that don't like wearing the suits that often run the people wearing the suits. When you actually break it down, this is why the red pill stuff, and when you see them all in the suits with the cigars, it's not representative of real life. I know what real life is like, and the richest people that I know and the wealthiest people that I know, they're in jeans and a white t-shirt. They're not wearing suits and smoking the cigars. But if you go back to the journey and just of an overarching journey of my life, it's like 16 I leave school, I become the carpenter. After a few years working as a carpenter and joiner, I realized that boxing isn't the right thing for me in terms of boxing myself, because I wasn't good enough to reach the level that I wanted to get to. So I pivot into the training. I become the youngest licensed British professional boxing trainer. Now from there, it now gets like 2013, and I think to myself, right, the UK for me is dead. I'm working on a job site. I'm earning 25 grand a year. I'm working security at the weekends, trying to make extra money because I'm trying to save to pay off my mortgage. I'm not happy there. I knew the environment wasn't right for me, so I changed everything and I booked a one-way flight to Australia. That one-way flight to Australia allowed me to change my life in ways that are immeasurable. And the one key piece of advice I want to give to everyone that listens to this is like, if you want to change where you are right now, the best thing you can do is change your environment, because your environment is what gives you a whole different focus on life and how you turn up. You see, and that change of environment went on to lead me to obviously working at world title level in boxing, having my own boxing gym, learning sales, developing my own company in 2017. That's how I'd collapse time for you in terms of my journey. But yeah,
so it's so interesting. I completely agree. We moved to Dubai 2.5 years ago, and we were just talking before we started recording that Dan Priestley, who we both know, literally was the person who said to us, if you just keep getting in rooms where you feel uncomfortable because you're the lowest on whatever level you're measuring by, you'll accelerate far quicker than anyone else. And so now it's so interesting, you probably see exactly the same, where you go back to places that you were a year, 2 years, or 5 years ago, and it hasn't changed, but you've changed so much because you're around these entrepreneurs all the time. We're in a similar position to you, not as far in advance with the podcast, but like you're around people who are just accelerating so fast, and you almost feel slow. And it's only when you turn around and look where you've come from, you realize actually you are going like hypersonic speed, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, and everything compounds for you. Like I was recently just back in the Gold Coast a couple of months ago, and I was living in the same apartment building I'd previously lived in like 2 years before I left to expand the podcast. And even though I enjoyed the life and I enjoyed the environment, I was like, wow, I've already done this before. So it was hard for me it was like I appreciated it, but it's almost like I needed to go back to see, okay, I've elevated now above this positioning. So now I need to reframe how I want to live my life, because this isn't going to be enough anymore. So I knew instantly in that moment, okay, right, I love Australia. I love being around here, but I can only be here for pieces of time now. I can't be here all year round, because it's not going to satisfy my goals, my vision, and everything else that I've restructured my life to be, because I've moved beyond that point.
I think that's really powerful. And I want to come back to the boxing part, because I think that's a really, really big part of your life up until, we'll get to that. I won't spoil the story now, but who was it that took you to boxing as an early age, or as a young person, and why? What was it trying to solve that you touched on?
I think what it was trying to solve essentially is like, I had a hyperactive imagination. I didn't feel like I fitted in with the narrative that I was in. I didn't quite have the ability to, the way I expressed was talking out of turn, essentially, and being obnoxious. So like, because I didn't know how else to express myself, and I didn't want to be like that. So essentially that's when I found boxing. I mean, I think boxing, the training side of boxing helped me the most. And then obviously becoming a trainer myself. That was when I was sparring back in 2012. And I was sparring a guy called Marcello Renda. And he was like one of the, hardest hitting British middleweights ever been. He's fought Martin Murray and everyone at top level. And I remember getting chinned by him, like straight down the flush on the right hand, straight on the nose, breaking my nose. And when you break your nose for the first time, it's clean snap across here. It congeals with blood. Your throat fills up with blood. You kind of dizzy. You can't describe how it feels, but I'm laying on the back on the canvas, and I realized in that moment, I'm like, do I want this? Is this for me? This guy's quality. This guy's a levels above where I'm ever going to be. Do I really want this? And I kind of decided I'll get up and finish this round. But when I sat on the canvas on the outside of the boxing ring, and you know how I'm there, I'm bleeding, I took my licks, I've done it, all that kind of stuff. I'm there, but I'm sat on the side of the canvas and I'm thinking to myself, there's more for you than this. This isn't your best modality of touching the world in the way that you want to touch the world, right? I think the way that when I'm stood in the corner of a fighter and I'm speaking to a fighter in the corner as well during rounds, I understand the deep psychology of what he's going through because I've been in those sparring sessions. I've been hit by these people. I understand that psychology, and I realized I could speak better to the psychology and help that fighter who's got the 0.1% skill be the better version of themselves. And that was the role that I pivoted into, and then when I became the professional boxing trainer, obviously everyone's doubting me because I'm one of the youngest to do it. This was before Ben Davison took Tyson Fury, and he became the youngest after me a few years down the track. But I traveled around the world. I was working with all the amateurs in all the amateur gyms. I was working up and down the country, all the way from like Liverpool to York Hall. I was on the scene with journeymen. I was just wrapping hands. I was doing pads. I was seconding corners. I was here, there, and everywhere, right? All over the country, learning the art of the boxing training, trying to prove myself. As I went through that journey, I got given different pieces of opportunities. And then when I got to Australia, I got a call from Frank Reeves in Australia, and I'd just been at ringside at Manny Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn, right, in Brisbane, the Battle of Brisbane. I don't believe Jeff Horn won that fight for a moment, but anyway, he gets it on the scorecards. It is what it is, right? But I get a call from Frank Reeves after that fight. He rings me. He's obviously based out of the Peacock Gym with Gary Cochran, and he says to me, "Frankie, we've signed to fight, Jeff Horn in his defense for the WBO world title. Would you second my corner?" And I was like, wow, what an opportunity that is for me, because this was a dream. So imagine then, let's take it back. So imagine from sitting on the side of that canvas, what did I want to do? I realized in that moment I wasn't good enough to be this quote unquote boxer. So I realized that, I put my heart and soul into being a professional trainer. Why did I do that? Because I felt I had to prove something to the world, right? I didn't, but I felt that in my body, right? So imagine this then. So Gary comes over to Australia. We're sparring, we're doing the rounds, we're doing this, we're doing the training. It's a couple of weeks before the fight. Now it comes to fight night. Now, so picture the scene, right? We stood in the changing rooms. There's 15,000 people. There's 4 different TV channels. I'm out there trying to prove everything I can to the world. So imagine it. You've set the scene, right? So we start walking out to the ring. I'm here. Frank Reeves is here. Gary Cochran's here. We're walking out. We're walking out to the ring. Obviously, we've got to walk first because we're the away fighter. We get there. We get to the ring. So we stood in the middle of the ring. So Gary's there. Frank's there. I'm there. You got Michael Buffer there.
Wow.
It gets to the point where, Jeff Horn's walked into the ring. He stood there. We're looking out. We're all looking out at 15,000 people. The Australian anthem's playing, It gets to the point where Michael Buffer's introducing the fighters, and then he says, "Let's get ready to rumble." As he says, "Let's get ready to rumble," as he says that, right, I'm looking out and I feel absolutely fuck all. Because I realize in that moment that my whole life I've leant my ladder against the wrong wall to prove something to someone who doesn't even matter. In that moment, yeah? And my heart sinks. Everything that I've pursued up until that point has been to prove something to someone that doesn't even fucking matter to me. Like it wasn't even my game. None of this was my game.
Wow.
It was all about proving a point, but a point to who? I didn't know. It wasn't for me. And when you learn that kind of insight about yourself and you're faced with it in front of 15,000 people, 4 TV screens, you think you've built this up to be this big epitome in your life. And then you get to the fucking pinnacle of what you believe is or you've just climbed the ladder of what you think is success. And you get there and you're like, holy fuck, this is not what I thought it was. Massive moment, right? But then what happens is the fight finishes. I'm feeling empty. We've pulled him out in the 10th or 11th round because of cuts over the above and below the eyes. So we've saved his eye, his career, because obviously he's got a fight on, right? Yeah. We get back to the changing room and I feel like cold. I feel like empty, done. So I step out of the changing room in the hallway and I got missed calls from my mum, right, on the phone. And I'm thinking, what the fuck's my mum ringing me? Like anyway, I ring her back. I can't get through to her. I ring her back. I get through to her. She says to me, right, your nephew Rocco, he's he died for 12 minutes, right? He had a hole in his heart. They never found it. He's now 6 months old. He's died for 12 minutes whilst this fight was going on. He's died for 12 minutes in that time frame, and they've managed to resuscitate him, and they've got him flown to a heart hospital in London, right? So you imagine, I'm getting like all this is wild.
Emotions, wow.
So I'm getting the emotion from this. I'm like, I think my life's over here because I've let my lad against the wall. When it all transpired, he's safe, he's well, he's repaired now, it's all good. But when I flew back to England, this is how weird this is. This is how serendipitous the world is. When I flew back to England and I cross-checked the time of when he was taken in and the cardiac arrest happened.
No.
Right? The cardiac arrest happened at the same time as I was looking out of the ring, right? Because I cross-referenced it across the TV channels and stuff like that. I cross-referenced it, worked it out. It happened at a similar, exactly same time as when Michael Buffer was saying, let's get ready to rumble. And I was looking out of the ring saying that I felt empty inside. And I felt like, I felt like how everything died, and I explained that thing. That was the exact same time. And it was just, and it made me think to myself, how powerful is that? Like, it was a complete shift of reality. So a part of me died that night, and then my nephew, which is like one of the closest things in my life, it's a part of him died as well.
It's like an epiphany, wasn't it?
And it was like a whole epiphany moment, and something that allowed me to go, fuck, I've got to shift. And then from that point onwards, I realized, right, whatever I do in life right now, it can't be about doing things for other people anymore. It has to be about serving a greater purpose. It has to serve me, but then serve other people by serving you first. And that was the whole epiphany to that whole scenario.
Wow, what are the chances of all that happening together? That's actually the most incredible story of personal development, or like the start of a personal development journey, really, isn't it? Like, how can that have all happened at once?
Yeah, you can't write it, and that's why when something like that happens to you, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
So when in the days after, when I was journaling about this event, I was like, okay, right, put these events together. What's happening in this moment? Well, it was a shock to I was pursuing something for someone else's purpose. So I would have gone on, I'd have continued with my boxing gym, I'd have continued training professional fighters, I'd have continued trying to prove the world something I wasn't, and all this kind of, I'd have continued along that path. Or you can feel like that, Rocco can die for 12 minutes and we can bring him back. That'll give you the shake-up, right? Because that'll show you that life is too fucking short, Frankie. Life is too short. You can't unsee this. That's what it was. It was almost like God, universe, whatever you believe in, showing you, right, we're going to give you a hard stop here. I went back from that, and after I journaled the next day, I shut the boxing gym down. I completely retired from boxing training. I came back probably like a 12 months later to work a corner as a favor, but other than that, never went near it again.
But what's really interesting is that was the second time that you had that realization, really, right? Because when you were working as a trainer in the UK and you decided that you were going to go to Australia, that was the first time that you were like, actually, I'm going to move to Australia. I'm going to do something completely different, whether people think it's a good idea or not. And then the second time, it was like a nudge again to go, you came here for a reason.
I got the nudge. I ignored the nudge, and then the universe slapped me.
Yeah.
But they made it so I couldn't unsee it. You can't unsee hearing that your nephew's died for 12 minutes.
You just hear my nephew's died. You don't hear.
Well, what is 12 minutes?
Yeah.
It's 4 rounds. They even did it in a boxing terminology. It was even done in a boxing terminology so that I got what you're saying. Where was I? I was on a world title fight. Same night, same time frame. When he's saying, let's get ready to rumble, and the fight starts, same thing happens.
So then you left the boxing gym, didn't you? And then you went back to carpentry for a bit in
So
Australia?
I went back to working as like a carpenter. I was just doing shop fitting around Australia, doing a bit of this, bit of that. And then what transpired is, I realized that I needed to get into sales because I'd had a client that came into my boxing gym. He was an overweight guy, and I thought that I was training him. But really what he was doing when I was training him to lose weight, he was training me. Read this book, do this, do this, do this. Frankie, you're actually a better communicator than you are. You're good at boxing training, but like you got so much more to give. You need to start getting on the phone. That's
a fundamental part of training is communication, isn't it? Wow.
100%. It's the biggest part that I learned. It's why I do what I do now.
Yeah.
Because because when I'm in that corner and I'm talking to a fighter, I can just make him realize things about himself that he'll never realize.
Yeah.
I can make him see things within himself that he can't see in that moment. And that's the power of communication in itself.
I've seen you speak about this guy before that you were training in Australia.
Yeah.
And I think it was really interesting because I think what you said was that he was shadow boxing or something. You just chatting whilst he was doing some exercises or whatever you were doing with him. And he said you need to start reading more books. And you said, I don't really read books. Like I'm not into it. I do sports and whatever. Can you remember the books that he told you to read, if he recommended any?
Yeah, he got me reading like Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Nice.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad were just the core fundamental books. The E-Myth with Gerber, so that I understood about business and systems and stuff like that. And then he got me to pivot. He actually took me on in my first sales job.
No way.
And he sacked me after a week. He said to me, I went as a booker, and he trained me up, and he sacked me, but I realized why he sacked me. He's like, I'm putting this guy on too much. Like in terms of like, I'm giving him too many legs up. Like he needs to go and cut his own cloth. True. So he got rid of me, not because I was bad at sales or bad at booking. He got rid of me because he felt like he was giving me a too easy journey into it. So he got rid of me, and that gave me because I know he knew this because he told me years later. He knew that I reacted to fire within me. So he sacked me to light a fire within me. The next job I got, I was top salesman inside the first month. So he lit that fire within me because he knew I'd come back fighting. I went away, a few days, licked my wounds, wanted to quit sales. Then I'm like, nah, fuck you, I'm going to prove something. Yeah. He knew I had that in me. That's why he did that to me.
I think that's so important. I think so many people that are given legs up, or they get given investment to start business, whatever it might be, I mean, that's a bad example, they do tend to just quit quite quickly, or they don't tend to push as hard as they can. And you look at someone like Hormozy, and like, you know, he's very far to one way. You've got to work this many hours if you want to succeed. But he's not wrong. Like, I think entrepreneurship these days is very much around like, it's really easy and you can just do it by making some content. And like, people get into it and then they lose all their money. We spoke to Joe Woodhouse recently about wealth building on the podcast, because he was talking about, he feels like his job is almost to help families overcome becoming an entrepreneur or making money in Dubai in particular, and thinking it's going to last forever, or thinking that it's actually easy, and it's really, really not. So I think it's a great idea for him to have sacked you for whatever reason.
Yeah, so he gets rid of me, and I go off relentlessly trying to prove that I can sell this and the other. So I go to this company, I sell, I become the top sales guy. You know, most of the whole sales team was doing about 50 to 100 grand a month. I was doing 150 grand a month.
This is a reputation management company?
Yeah, reputation management company. And I was doing 150 grand a month on my own.
Nice.
3 months later, I'm like, I want a piece of equity of this company because of all the stuff I'd learned in the books.
Nice.
They wouldn't give me a piece of equity. I hadn't signed a contract, so I left and set up contentremover.com to solve a bigger problem within the niche that I knew, because I was talking to all these people, right? In this time frame, obviously I go set up contentremover.com on the back of learning this sales stuff. I'm not talking to James Gray because I'm still pissed off with the fact that he sat me, right? So I'm not. So he's
the first boxing client.
So he was the guy. James Gray was the guy. So I've not talked to James now. I'm pissed off with James. I'm like, you sat me. You've gone against me. You're trying to.
Oh, you couldn't see it at the time.
I couldn't see it. No.
Okay, cool.
So then I go on a path. Then I come to contentremover.com and I realize, right, what did I learn? I'm thinking, before I start this business, what did I learn? Okay, well, I learned that I could try and sell to the bottom feeders in the world, like removing Google reviews and doing all that stuff, or I can go and sell to the top of town. So I reverse engineered contracts that said, okay, we'll take on 10 links from this influencer, said influencer, we'll remove 10 and this will unlock a 132 grand a year deal. Now, I had engineered, the first one of those I engineered was with a girl called Kayla Racines that owns sweat.com. She's the biggest fitness influencer in the world. Then I engineered one with another influencer and another influencer in the fitness space. And within 3 months, I had $500,000 a year on retained revenue that I'd unlocked with what I call unlock value contracts, where it's like you do something for free, looks free on the front end, but it unlocks a value on the back end. Value for the client, value for you as a business, everything like that. So it gets to now January, what this business is going. I went about another 6, 7, 8, 9 months without talking to James, right? But then when I spoke to him, I don't know how it ended. He messaged me. He says, "You're doing well. Proud of you." This and the other. And I said, "Fucking proud of me. You sacked me." Like, we get into this conversation. He's like, "Yeah, do you know why I sacked you?" And then we get into all this. He starts to unpack it, and I start to see the bigger vision. He's like, he goes, "Brother, whether we're friends or not, the best thing I could have done for you is to sack you. Look where you are."
So he's actually part of that universe. He's like the third tap. So you had the one that made you move to Australia, the second one that made you quit boxing, and the third one was, okay, you've got something, but you need to be pushed further.
So yeah, so when I even think about how I acquired James as a boxing client, I didn't know how to do Facebook ads and stuff back in the day. It was 2017, probably like 16 or whatever. So I just record a video on my phone. I'll whack it up as a Facebook ad. I'm basically there, and because of my attitude to life, I was basically saying, "Hey, Australian boxing trainers are fucking shit. Like this, they don't teach you footwork. I teach you footwork. I teach you this. You should come to my boxing gym." That's how I was, right? Yeah. And you could get away with stuff like that but I was very obnoxious, very in your face when I was selling what I was doing. And then it was click a link to book a call. James Gray booked a call with me. I get on the call, right? Another English guy and an English guy. Okay. He's got an ego because he's successful in business. I got an ego because I think I'm the greatest boxing trainer that's ever entered Australian history, right? So on the call, we're literally having he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna come and speak to you," and I'm like, "No, you buy or you don't come," and this and that. So even our first call, he was helping me overcome my ego by matching me. Even in the psychology of the first call, right? Because to be honest, any other person if I'd spoken to anyone else at his level on the call like that, I would have lost that client. It wouldn't have come back. But he rolls up in his sports car outside my little double garage unit that I've got as his boxing gym. And he says, "Oh yeah, I'm James Green. I was on the phone to you." He goes, "You're making a lot of mistakes on this sales thing. You're not going to sell people like that. What are you doing?" And he gave me an education before we even started.
No way.
So it's like the whole process. You know how if you look at the hero's journey in life, what is the hero's journey? The hero goes, well, he needs to change his life, so he changes his location. Then what does he do? He meets a guide. That guide takes him on a journey of him finding himself and looking at himself in the mirror a bit, overcoming self. And then he sets him free and he grows again, and then he meets another guide, and then the same guy does it again. So one of the guides in our lives at this juncture we're at is Daniel Priestley, right? Yeah. Daniel Priestley's helped us. He's helped us see things that we can't previously see, and we're overcome them. And he taught me about software, and he's like introduced me to Jeremy Harbour, and things happen, right? Well, James Gray was my first, after my boxing trainer, in the original days, the Lee Muxos of the world, the Giorgio Mundos of the world, the Vicky Brianos of the world. After those three lads had took me under their wing to got me to a certain point, the next person was James Gray. This is why I say to people, mentorship is the most important thing that you can have in your life, right? Whether it's a paid mentorship that you pay like 10 or 15 grand for, or whether it's, mentors that you meet naturally through a boxing gym, through your gym, through your work, whatever. But you meet people and they're guides along your path that take you to different echelons and different levels right the way through. It's about identifying who they are as fast as possible, overcoming your own ego, letting it go and thinking, okay, what is it I don't know about myself? What is it I don't know about the situation that I have to learn here? And that was what I had to do at every level with James. He challenged me on every single level of the game.
And this is really interesting because I've spoken to people about this week, as in like someone spoke to me about this, and they were saying, as you find success, whatever that looks like to you, more people will want to come to you to learn or to become, ride your coattails, whatever it is. And one of the biggest skills you've got to learn, and you'll have had this from your podcast ages ago, because people start to be like, oh, wow, how are you doing this? How are you meeting that person? Then they want a part of it. So how do you know who to be associated with, who to take guidance from, and who to avoid?
Your gut.
Okay.
Always trust the gut. The gut is, if you look at what is a gut in biological terms, the gut is your second brain, right? You have your brain, which is your actual brain, and then your gut. Your gut feeling, your gut runs your whole body, your whole microbiome, how you feel, how everything is run from your gut. Your gut never lies. That's why every time I've brought what I believe is a beautiful wife home to meet my mum, she's gone, nice girl, Frankie, not for you.
I just want to briefly interrupt this podcast so I can talk to you about Nutrition Kitchen, who have kindly sponsored this episode. As entrepreneurs who are looking to stay as healthy as possible, fueling ourselves with high quality food without breaking the bank or wasting time can be tough day to day. Nutrition Kitchen solves that issue by delivering incredible meals to your door, tailored to your diet, whether you're trying to lose weight, build muscle, or maintain balance. They change their menus all the time so you can choose from a variety of dishes and leave the monotony of meal prepping behind. Now, back to our guest.
Because that woman knows me, she's had me in the womb for 9 months. She knows me. She's been connected to me. She knows me at an intimate level. She feels something. She doesn't think, your mother doesn't think logically with her brain. She feels with her gut about what her son should do and not do. And obviously, mothers can advise you outside of business. They can't advise you on business because not a lot of them know business. Let's be real. But if I listen to my mum when her gut tells her something about my relationships with people or with a woman, she's right every time, bro. Way ahead of the schedule.
Really? Just from her gut, because she knows?
Because all mothers that love their sons, love their daughters, understand with the gut ahead of time what's going to happen in their relationships. It's just that we're too dumb enough. We're too dumb to think that a woman that's been connected to us, given us 9 months before life, and then looked after us in our childhood. We're too dumb to understand that she knows something more about us and how we feel and what's right for us than we do in the relationship sphere. Now, that's predicated. How can I say that? Well, my mum and dad have been married 44 years, a very traditional family. Obviously, I've been very lucky and very fortunate to have that kind of family to bring me up. I'm not saying that's the same for everybody. Obviously, you can have different environments and it's not. But if you come from the environment where your mum and dad have been together, very traditional values similar to me, I can successfully say from my own advice, every time I ignore her and ignore her gut feeling on these things, I'm usually the one that's wrong. She's not wrong. So when it comes back to what you should trust inherently within your body, you should always trust your gut because your gut always knows. It's like let's just take it back to the relationship things. Every relationship, the last 2 relationships that I've been in, where I've took the woman home to meet my mum and my mum's gone, after literally one occasion, she's gone, nice girl. I'm not saying anything bad about her, but she's not for you, Frankie. She's not for you. I'm just telling you ahead of time, she's not for you. Looks me in the eyes, not for you. Every time I've ignored it, I get the lesson. But if I actually think back to the red flags that have presented and how my gut felt when these presented, but I'd overlooked them with lust and overlooked them because I find the girl super attractive, I should have trusted my gut too, because my gut also knew. So let's take it back. Let's take it back to all of you guys that listen to this right now. Your gut always knows who to trust in business, who to trust in life, where to go. You just haven't spent long enough time sat with yourself to listen to your gut. So how do you do that? Well, you learn to meditate, you learn to be present, you learn to listen to your own intuition. Because we can all go out and seek mentors and seek advice and seek guidance from all these different people, but now you're getting too many opinions. I said seek mentors, but first you need to seek yourself. If you seek yourself first, the mentors will present themselves, but you first need to seek yourself and then the mentors will appear. Because many mentors, quote unquote, will appear in your life, but they're not all your mentors. They're not for you. They're not all for you. There's been many people that have offered me guidance on my journey that I will not take. Because for argument's sake, if you think of a man that I'll take guidance from, what is a man that I'll take guidance from? Well, it's a man that has a good relationship with his wife, has a good relationship with his children, has traditional values, this, that, and the other. So I would take advice and guidance from someone like that. I'll learn off the others, but I'll take the advice and the guidance off the men that I resonate with, right? But there's too many people out there going out into their environment. They're taking advice and guidance from men or women that aren't even living the life that they want to live.
Yeah, true.
Or living incongruently to who they say they are on Instagram. There's so many mentors out there, or quote unquote mentors, that will say they're doing this, and this, and this, live this life on Instagram, but then not be congruent with who they are on the back end. Again, that's not your mentor. That's someone else's mentor. That's congruent with them. That's not congruent with you. Sitting with yourself is the best advice I can give you. So if you, going back to your original question, how do you know who to choose? How do you know? You know because you listen to your own gut, right? Because your mind will try and fool you at many times because the mind's archaic, but the gut sits within you. It's your internal compass. Always use it.
Interestingly, I imagine this is quite a good little segue here. If you don't trust your gut and you go with someone, a mentor or someone in a relationship who isn't congruent with you and your values, I imagine they're the ones who then put you in the most jeopardy, which would then lead you to using contentremover.com.
It does, but I want to take it even a step further before we go into contentremover.com. I want to take it even a step further because I want to give these guys value. If you go against your gut and you become incongruent, let's just talk about, I'll keep it about my relationships with women.
Yeah.
So let's just go back to my previous relationship. In my previous relationship, my mum tells me this girl's not for you. I ignore her, I go through. This girl's beautiful, she's got her own shit going on, she's not a bad woman, I've got nothing bad to say about her. But what happens when you go against your own gut and you go against the gut of my mum's gut feeling in this moment, right? What happens is when you're going against two people's gut feelings on an outcome predicated on lust and this, you start to do things in your life, and this applies to business as well if you're doing this with a mentor, you start to do things in life and your business that compromise your values and your boundaries. Now what happens? Now you start to become frustrated, right? Because your gut knows, hang on a minute, we're getting close to my boundary here. That's crossing the line. I don't agree with that. But you stop saying things. Your throat chakra, or whatever you want to call it, starts to close down. You stop to express yourself. You start to become frustrated. You start to become angry. That builds up. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It happens in business and it happens in life. I mean, we can go back to contentremover.com now, but I wanted to make sure we got that out so that everyone can understand what I'm saying. It goes against congruency.
And I think a lot of that comes back to a lot of people have never thought deeply about what they want or their own values. They sort of just, like we spoke about right at the start, we spoke about being pushed through the system, going to uni or not, and getting a job and a mortgage, and then being like, what is going on? As a young adult in your mid-20s, I think between 27 and 32, most people have that moment where they go, what on earth? I've got to this age just by literally following a train track, someone pushed me down.
Yeah.
They never thought about their values or where they want to get to. And then that's where I think regret can come from, because you've managed to do all these things. You haven't trusted your gut perhaps, and you've never done the work to understand who you are or where you're going. And that's where people fall into these depressions and the lack of just worldly understanding, because they don't know what they're doing.
Yes, this quote unquote depression that people fall into happens because they've never sat down long enough with themselves to learn, okay, what is it I want? Who do I want to be? And we're at a time, I don't know when you're releasing this podcast, obviously we're recording at the end of 2024, but maybe it's released in 2025. But whenever it's released, whether you release it before the end of 2024 or start of 2025, you're at the most pivotal time in your life right now to really get a hold of and ascertain, what is it I want? Don't just set New Year's resolutions. That's not going to work. That's not going to cut it. But what do I want in my business? What do I want in my life? How do I want my spouse to look? All these things you can get real super clear on and get super descriptive on in a journal, because it's just between you and the journal. Then get your journal out and go, right, write down on this side of the page, on the left-hand side, write down who am I right now in this moment? Who am I? Like truly. And just be honest about who you are. All your flaws, all your lacks, all your positives, all your negatives, everything like that. Just write down who you are. Write down on this side, because this is just between you and the journal, write down who you want to be, right? The best version, how you dream life to be. Write down that version on that side and be super descriptive with it. The beauty of this is just between you and the journal. So when you've got 2 pages filled up, one with who you are right now and one with who you want to be, there is a gap in the middle of that. And that gap is the gap that needs to be closed. But you can't see the gap that needs to be closed, and you can't see how much of it's closed and how to close it without seeing the gap in its full entirety. By seeing it, you can then turn the page over and then think, okay, what do I have to address and in what order to close this gap, to up-level my life in this environment? What has to be closed? What do I have to leave behind in 2024? What do I have to put in place in 2025 to take me to the next level? What do I have to put in? Who do I have to become? Yeah. How do I have to dress? Who do I have to speak to? How do I have to operate? Where are my non-negotiables? All of these things get clear. But the only way to get clear is to be radically honest with self. And that's what not people are willing to do. Not enough people are willing to do that.
And the funny thing about all this is that you would never run a business without doing this. Like having some sort of business plan or some vision, some mission you're trying to go towards, and some sort of step-by-step by the quarters of the year. But people won't do it on their own for themselves, right? I think it's something that we really, really should be doing. And also it's worth saying that, most people listen to this have got businesses. You don't need to move half around the world, and you don't need to aim to be worth 100 million. Like that's not everyone's journey, and it's no one's saying that's the right thing or the wrong thing. It's just part of your own journey.
Well, 100 million is a clickbait title, 10 million is a clickbait title. These are all clickbait things. It's actually finding out what do I believe that I need in life to be ultimately happy? Figuring out what that is. I think a lot of people can be happy at, £40,000 a month from 2 clients with an online business that they work from a laptop in wherever they want, and they have time with their family, right? Well, that's not £1 million a year business, is it? No. 80, I think it's 88 or £87,000 or £83,000, whatever it is, it works out $1 million a year, right? So it's like, well, a lot of you don't need the $1 million a year to be your full happy self and this and live the life of abundance that you want. A lot of you don't need this. Why does that have to be your goal? Just because you saw, Samuel Anura doing his e-com stuff, he's doing 40, 50 million, whatever. You'll see Davey Fogarty in Australia with e-com doing this, that, and the other. You'll see Iman Gadzhi out there telling you next year you got to grow a personal brand. What I mean? You are letting the algorithm tell you what you want. I'm saying to you, no, don't listen to Frankie Lee. Don't listen to you. Don't listen to any of us. How about you sit down with yourself? I'm guiding you towards self, not towards anyone else. The closer you can get to who the fuck you are, now you can figure out what you want. Now you can figure out your goal. Most of you don't know the target. You think it's 100 million. It might not be. It might not be 100 million. I mean, I sat down with a mentor the other day called Peter Try in Australia, and we were talking about, he said to me, look, Frankie, life is a marathon, and then you get to a point by doing the marathon activities, you get to the point where you can have a 5-year sprint. And in that 5 years is where you make your 20, 30, 40 million, right? He says, and you will teach yourself up nicely to make your 10, 20, 30 million in a time frame, a time window. He says, I'm telling you now, Frankie, when you've done 30 million, everyone tells you it's 100 million, it's not. Once you got 30 million, in net worth and value in this, that's when you're ultimately free. He says, but you can be free from like 1 to 5 if you've got a different level of goal and a different level of life. It just because he knows the level of life that I want and what I want to attain, I'm very clear on it. I want to have my own jet at some point. I want to do this, that, and the other. I want to be traveling around the world, doing podcasts in my jet, and doing all kinds of stuff. Exit a couple of software companies because those are my goals. 30 million is my goal, right? Because I've sat and I've worked it out. Most people that listen to this even have a business that they're planning on exiting. They don't know who they're going to exit to. They don't know what exit number they want. They don't know what fucking net worth they want. Hang on a minute. If you've got a business and you're designing it as a vehicle that you want to exit at some point, day one, when you set that business up, you should know 5 or 6 people that you could possibly exit to and build it so you can exit to those exact people. Build your software company, build your business so you can exit to those people. And bearing in mind, regardless of what business you built, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of whether you even want to sell it, every business should be built to be exitable anyway. This is something I didn't even fucking understand when I started, but I wish I had. It's like I didn't design contentremoval.com in the initial period to be sold. It's held me back for years. I had opportunity to when I could have sold it, but I couldn't sell it for what I wanted to sell it to because it wasn't engineered that way. So the multiple was shit. So this is why I'm building it into a software company and I'm building stuff on the back end, because then when you put the agency and the software piece together, what have you got? You've got a high cash flow model and a software where you can obtain a high multiple. You bolt them together, and now I can exit for the multiple that I want on the back end and sell it for what I need to sell it for to attain what? My goal that I predetermined when I sat down with myself for fucking long enough and discovered what I wanted to do. Most of you have a business, have a life, have a wife, have 2 kids. You don't know whether you want 3 kids. You don't know whether you want 20 grand a month, whether you want 100 grand a month. You're not definite on whether you want to sell your business for 10.5 million or 20.5 million or 500k. And you certainly don't fucking know who the fuck you're going to sell it to when it comes to that point. And I'm saying, if you're not radically clear on all of it, you know nothing about yourself. You've not sat down with yourself long enough. So as much as we can talk about every other thing that they can do on this podcast, the only thing that they should do is sit down with themselves long enough to learn every framework about what you want in your own fucking life. Done.
Mic drop.
That's it.
Okay, so let's go back to this when you first started contentremoval.com, right? So you're already in reputation management. And so for listeners that don't know, that's effectively managing people's reputation online predominantly, right? So you're putting up content to manage their reputation. So would you call that as like PR?
PR, like SEO push down, easier content removal, like copyright and trademark infringements, etc., that kind of stuff.
Okay, so at what point, who were your first clients for contentremoval.com, and what happened for you to go, actually, there's a better way of doing this and I can do this without needing to be employed?
So in terms of My first clients for my actual business, or my first clients for the reputation management firm?
For your actual business. It was your friends in the UK, right?
My first client for my actual business was Kelly Racines and Sweat.com.
Okay, so before that, when you understood that you could start a business, that you had some friends that messaged you from the UK.
So originally I had some girls that were suffering with revenge porn. So whilst I was negotiating, looking after Sweat.com and doing the 10 removals, right? I'm figuring out how to remove content, because I started contentremoval.com without knowing how to remove content.
Yeah.
I learned through sales that you sell the concept and then you work out how to fucking do it when you sold the concept.
Yeah.
But unless you've proven the concept, what's the point in even starting the business, right? So I bought contentremoval.com. I put up a one-page website. I reached out to Kelly Racines' team. It took a lot longer than this. Took 5-6 weeks. Get in touch with them. Then I negotiate this contract where there's 10 unlock allows me to protect the brand on a yearly basis. I think it's like 132 grand. How I got that figure in all fucking transparency was I added what I needed to earn per year myself to cover my own wages, plus what I had left on my mortgage, added them together. I got 132 grand.
Okay.
So I just priced it based upon what I needed to free myself from what I term as a quote unquote matrix, right? Yeah. So I freed myself from that. Now on the back end of that, I've got 2 girls in the UK that go, hang on, Frankie, we've seen you working in this reputation management company. We've got some things where our explicit images have been shared, on this place called anon.ib, right? Anon.ib was a message board where men would go on and share photos of women, and women would go on and share photos of men from sexually explicit counters. And it's just a revenge porn website. Now, learning from dealing with that and removing revenge porn gave us another side of the business. So we started looking after the biggest OnlyFans models, porn stars that wanted to retire their careers, and we just focused on giving women back their lives in that sense as well, so they could go on and have relationships and do that sort of thing. So that's how the business kind of developed along 2 niches at the time: protecting the high-end brands, which was our bread and butter, which was what made all the money, and then we did the piecework where every say 2 or 3 months we'd give away free removals to someone that was facing revenge porn. And kind of look after them like that. That's kind of how it started.
And it's become the biggest content removal company in the world, right?
I'd say so. The biggest company in the world that can actually remove content, yeah.
And so you work with some of the biggest celebrities in the world. And what your business now, effectively, would you say it's the retainer manages stuff that is put up or leaked against them?
Yeah.
So you constantly monitor the internet, take stuff down that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, so we've got proprietary software at the back end that monitors our clients and stuff like that. We're also building proprietary software that's going to automate the removal of content for clients that can't afford to use our manual process, which is obviously expensive to use us in the way that we do manually, because it's very labor intensive. I mean, this software is not going to be able to go to a server in Azerbaijan and remove something for you. I mean, that's a very manual process, but essentially it should be able to encapsulate 80% of what a normal person wants to achieve on the internet, which is wipe their online presence to a degree that's acceptable, so they can protect themselves, so they can get better jobs, so that if they've had an OnlyFans career and they want to retire, or remove all that kind of stuff.
But it could also be an entrepreneur that's had a previous business, built a personal brand around it, and now wants to be known for something else. They can do the same thing, same process.
Yeah, same process. Our software will identify what you're struggling, where we believe the threats are, and put them into a list, and then you determine whether you want to remove that piece of content or not. Then you essentially tick a box, and then we determine whether, using our due process, whether that's appropriate that content can be removed. And if we think it is, from our software and from our AI and from all of our information over the last, since 2017, we then give it what we term as an appropriate justification, and our automated service will then go out and place the applications required, write the applications, and place the applications to the relevant parties to get the removal for the client.
Oh, I see. Okay. So, and I'm presuming this though, that some companies would come to you because they're knowingly going to leak something, but they know it shouldn't be out there, and they want it removed in 2-3 weeks, and you can do that.
So some of the biggest women that you've seen online that have had sex tape leaks in the last 5 or 6, 7 years will have purposely released that. I've had us on retainer to clean up the back end.
Really?
It is released for a certain period, and it does sales. OnlyFans girls do it too. They leak stuff on Reddit. It's there for a period of time. We come back and clean it up within a certain time frame, but that increases subscriptions to the platform and this, that, and the other. Right?
So it is like a whole PR machine.
So it's a whole PR machine. It's what they're doing,
Wow. And you can take everything away. So if someone, obviously if they download it, you can't, but
the way I look at content, in all honesty, the way I look at content is this. every piece of content has been put up by somebody in some jurisdiction. So logic dictates then that every piece of content could be taken down off a server, off the back end somehow, right? Whether it be off Google, whether it be off the server itself, or whether it be off the website or the dark web, wherever it is. Everything can be removed because everything's been put there, right? Yeah. Now, the caveat is this. What's the caveat? The caveat is there's a degree of difficulty change. The degree of difficulty change is predicated on where it is. Like I was saying to you, removing something off Facebook is going to be a lot swifter for us than removing something from a server in Azerbaijan that's protected by, DNS protection or whatever it is, right? So it's content removal isn't as simple as, just going and removing content. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more nuance to it. But our key clients are entrepreneurs that want protecting along their journey. People, every brand, if you're building a brand with what I term as exitable value, you should have a reputation management agency, whether it's us or someone else, I don't care really, but you should have one on a retained basis. Because if you want to protect the exitable value of the brand, when it comes to a company getting valued, right? So let's just say I buy your company. I come and I say, I want to acquire a company for 10 million. Then we go into what the term is due diligence, right? That company goes into due diligence. What is this company over here going to try and find to lower the value of this company? It's going to try and find any dirt. But some of these companies don't just try and find dirt. They place dirt there strategically to bring the value of your company down so they can acquire you for less. Seen it 17,000 times already. You should have a reputation management company, or contentremoval.com should go in there and protect you right up until the point of exit and protect you through the process. And that's what happened with sweat.com. We protected them right the way through from 2017 right up until the point of exit for 400 million.
Wow.
Right? So they would not have been able to exit that business for 400 million, 200 million each cash in pocket for the founders if they had had negative content come up through the due diligence process and then lower the value of the company. iFit wouldn't have paid it. They'd have gone, right, we'll take off 10 million for that, reputation damage, and this, that, the other. They'd have brought the value down, exitable value of the business. You can't have that when you're trying to exit a company.
There's a great video of a guy who was selling his company to Steve Jobs for like 400 million in the early 2000s, I think. And Steve Jobs comes into the meeting and they've already agreed it's going to be something like 400 million. And Steve Jobs comes in with a piece of paper, throws it at him and goes, look what we found in your company. Exactly same principle. And the guy's like, oh, it's nothing, just a bit of bad news. And Steve Jobs goes, okay, from now, your software does not work on Apple devices because of this. That's going to hurt our entire reputation. We'll buy the company, but for 200 million. And the guy's like, no, we've already done the deal. Like we're selling for 400. And he goes, okay, from tomorrow, your software does not work on Apple devices. Go and tell your board. And he signed that company for 200 million, half the price, because of that piece of content. He was able to use as leverage, which is so interesting.
Yeah, so leverage is the exact word for what people are doing here. So if you can either pay a content removal agency, your 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand a month to protect you at whatever level size of business you are and pay the fee to be protected, or you lose millions on the back end of when you exit, and you will, because every due diligence process, who do they employ when they're doing due diligence? They'll employ a content removal agency to dig up crap on you as well.
Really?
Now, they won't employ us to do it because we don't do it for brands, but we protect brands on the exit. But I'm saying there's other agencies out there that will put out bad content on you, that will get paid to do bad content on you, that will bring your exitable value down. Yeah. This is what people don't see, right? Buying and exiting companies is a key thing. There's no faster way to grow your customers than to buy another company that already has your existing customers and wrap them in. Because you can buy a company for 10 million today, wrap your customers in, and increase your multiple of your 10 million company. You've got a company now worth 40 million. Yeah. I understand that. So acquisition entrepreneurship is a real thing. It happens all the time, right? But you've got to be able to protect yourself so that you can get the best actionable value for your company when you exit it. Reputation management is the key to that. No one understands it. Everyone misses it. They all regret it.
This is why you get on so well with Jeremy Harbour, right? Because this is exactly what he's talking about.
Jeremy gets what I'm saying. Yeah. And this is why Jeremy wanted me to pivot towards moving this company into software and data and all the stuff where I'm pivoting it to, is because I've been around Daniel. Daniel Priestley said to me, the best thing you can ever build is software, highest multiple, this, that, and the other. Best value for clients, so we've built it. Jeremy Harbour's like, Frankie, once you've sold contentremoval.com, you'll never build another company again. You'll only buy them.
Yeah.
right? And that's the truth. Once you've built and sold your first company, if you've got any sense at all, you don't build another one. No. You buy them, you acquire them, you roll them together, you increase the multiple, and you sell them to someone else. Because that's the whole game. I didn't realize that piece of the game when you start. But now I've got this business. It's beautiful. It's highly profitable. It's going to be a great acquisition for someone like whoever, some other reputation management company, or even a Google or a Facebook could buy it because of what it does. Once I've exited that, then I'm not going to build another company again. No, I'll just buy and sell companies. Yeah, exactly. Because I know something different. I've got different metrics. I didn't have these metrics at the start.
This is one of the cool things about podcasting, isn't it? So we had Jeremy on and Dan on. Dan's up where you are, and you talk about all these things. Dan's a mentor separately, but Jeremy, we just spoke on the podcast, and then he was able to advise us on companies that we were looking at buying at the time. And he's able just to be like, oh, I'll do this deal slightly differently. And that's the power of podcasting, which is why I really want to touch on in the last sort of 10 minutes podcasting with you, because you have grown in the last 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Big podcast.
I've grown a big podcast, but I've not grown it fast. You know what I mean? It's been very slow.
Good though. We don't want fast growth. We want long-term growth, right? So I'm really interested in the podcast game because you've done tens of millions of views and you've flown around the world. You've met some incredible people. You were with Andrew Tate, a month ago, whatever, in Romania. So I'm interested in how it came about. How did it start? What was the first few steps? Because anecdotally, I started this a couple of years ago with two $30 lapel mics and my iPhone lent against some books with a friend who was becoming a life coach, and we just spoke at it for an hour and I had this full script. And so I'm interested in how you started and then how you grew over the 5 years.
In 2019, in June 2019, I was in Australia. I'd been making money online with content removal now for 2 years. I was making really good fucking money. But I felt, I had this anxiety, like, fuck, I need more out of life, man. I can't just sit behind a computer tapping away, making money. There's more to life than this. I felt like I had the urge to speak. I'd always thought about doing a podcast. But anyway, I fly back to England. After about 3 months in England, in a moment of frustration, I go down to the spare bedroom in my mum's house because I just got the email through saying, hey, Frankie, we've given you citizenship in Australia. Your citizenship ceremony is in February. This is in February 2020. February the 14th, 2020, right? So bear that date in mind. Valentine's Day 2020, I'm getting, on Valentine's Day 2020, the biggest love of my life, Australia, is giving me citizenship, right? Just keep that in your back pocket. Yeah. So I'm in now, end of summer in England, September time. I stepped down the spare bedroom in frustration, or it might have even been in June 2019. I stepped down the spare room in frustration, wanted to record this first podcast. I talked about it long enough, this, that, and the other. So I literally attacked it. I didn't even attach a mic. I just set the laptop up, no mic, just on the laptop, put the laptop on the floor of the bedroom and just spoke my truth and laid out the episode that, if you want to go back and listen to episode 1, it's called My 2020 Vision, right? And I laid it out and I published it on Anchor app and I just left it. I then come to leaving, I think to myself, right, I got this citizenship ceremony in 2020. I know I've got to be there for February. I'm going to return back to Australia. So I return back to Australia like September, October. I get back to Australia, go to my mate's birthday, this and the other, celebrate Christmas out there. It's all good. 2020 comes around, start of 2020 comes around, and I think, right, I'm going to start this podcast properly. So I start putting out these podcast episodes. I record first episode with my PT, this, that, and the other. You know, you build up. Then the citizenship ceremony comes around, and then all of a sudden, 2 weeks after my citizenship ceremony, I'm still celebrating in Australia, and then the whole world goes into meltdown. We started to see something around the 27th, 28th. I'd kind of seen it a couple of weeks before because I saw the content that was being removed online at scale about certain topics, and I'm like, this is weird, right? So I see it from a different angle. So I had an insight, but I didn't understand it. All of a sudden, Australia's locked. We're locked in Australia now. No flights in, no flights out, everything on the floor, right? 26 million captivated in the country. We had every major influencer was in Australia, locked in. We were all locked in. We were all locked in individual states. So I had like the perfect storm because I couldn't go back to England. I was locked in Australia for effectively 2 years. I didn't realize it at the time. But I had 2 years locked in Australia, 2 whole years, where every major influencer was locked in Queensland, essentially, which is the best place in Australia to be locked in. all the Sydney and Melbourne influencers were getting out of Sydney and Melbourne to come to Queensland because it's got the best environment and it was the most freest state of all of Australia because it was normal there. In Sydney and Melbourne, they had riot police on the street, they had guns, they were trying to force vaccinate people. It was all madness. But in Queensland, because all the politicians have houses there, it was like a free metropolis, right? So every major celebrity from abroad was trying to get into Australia. Everyone was trying to get into Australia. So it just even Tom Hanks. I met Tom Hanks on the beach because he was locked in Australia at the time as well.
Wow.
So it was like a melting pot of just the ideal time. I had all the biggest guests in Australia on my doorstep, but they had nothing to do. And I just fully launched into this podcast. My gym where I went to connect with people was just like the mecca of meeting people. Everybody knew who I was from that gym because I talked to everybody. All the celebrities were and influencers were trained there that I knew them all personally. So I just started pulling them all in for podcasts. And I just built it over 2 years. I just built it, and I only left Australia when I got to number 2 because I couldn't outrank Jordan Peterson in Australia with just Australian audience. So I had to leave to expand. And that's how I kind of went along the process of starting the podcast because I just had no other, what else? I was earning money from contentremoval.com anyway. It just seemed like the natural thing.
Yeah. So then you went on a podcast tour. That's how you sort of got to the number 1, or you made it bigger by touring to go to other places and be like, I'm doing a podcast. Do you want to come?
Yeah, so the first thing is once they opened the States and Australia, I toured all around Australia doing like Sydney, Melbourne, and all that kind of stuff and podcasting all over Australia. That took me to number 2 in Australia. Then I realised, I was sat on the beach one time, I was reflecting, I was like, right, if I want to be one of the best podcasts in the game, I can't just podcast in Australia.
Yeah.
So then I podcasted Dubai, I podcasted all across, Miami, Dubai, London, all across the UK, Spain, Portugal, Oman, Saudi Arabia, everywhere else in between, and I just went on a bit of a tour. But the kicker is that yes, I've done back end deals from advertising contentremoval.com on this podcast, and I've done back end deals on that's made me revenue. But the true essence is I've never really made $1 off the podcast, and it's cost me a good $1 million to go and do the podcast over 5 years to the level that I've done it. It's cost me a good $1 million. Not paying guests, never paid a guest in my life, but just paying travel. I never stay in shit apartments.
Yeah, of course.
The editing costs, the costs all add up. So everyone wants to start a podcast, but it's not a cheap thing to do, as you'll attest to.
Yeah, of course.
And it's very time consuming. I think you being in Dubai gives you great access because you're in the right place to do it. You've got good studios, good guests, good this, good that.
Yeah. But
my journey was hard because I had to start learning as I was going. I started with iPhones, mics, you know the game.
What I'm interested in, and we've got very little time, but I want to ask you what makes you a good guest, or what makes a good guest, because the 2 episodes that I really, really like from yours are Dr. John DiMartini and Tim Armo. Both this year. I think this year. Maybe Tim last year.
Tim,
but the reason I think they are really good is because they were inspiring and they gave actionable insights where it's not tactics. You've got like principles, strategies, and tactics. It was more like principles and then some strategy. It wasn't like, this is how you grow an Instagram following, like some people do. It was more like, this is what I've done. This is my vision, my views, my values. You can go away and then use it so you're reflecting whilst you're listening, because it's so personal podcasting. And you're able to go, wow, okay, that's actually hit me. And those 2 are the ones I was like, wow. They are really powerful. So what makes a good guest to you?
You want to know what makes a good guest. So what can make someone more bookable for podcasts and
what do you look for? What do you and your team look for in a podcast guest?
So what I look for in a guest is like, there's 2 types of guests that I look for. One, I want the household names that are on my vision board, like the Andrew Tates of the world and this and that. I want the household names that I've had on my vision board for the longest time. I want to achieve those guests. But then along the way, I look for what I term as like people that I believe haven't been podcasted right, haven't been asked a good second or third question along their narrative, and that's up and coming. And I like to bring people to the podcast game as well. So I've brought, just off the top of my head, Ash White from Hera, Paul Richardson, director of Gymshark, Adrian Portelli, Davey Fogarty's first podcast, Will Spark, all these different people. I've brought them to the podcast game, and nothing fires me up more than when I'm bringing a person to the podcast game that's refused. Daniel Dallin was the latest one. Daniel Dallin's going viral on YouTube. I was the first one to bring him to the podcast game, and the way I think about it is, from a guest point of view, is like, I want to be the first one to interview him because I don't want to see someone else fuck it up. That's what I'm thinking about it. But when it comes to being a good guest, it's about knowing. I look for the people that have I believe have a good story that have never told it, and I also look for the people that have got a good story, have told it, but it's been murdered. And I kind of merge it two together, and I go after those guests. That's how I go against this. Now, if you want to be a good guest on a podcast, because I think this is relevant for your audience, because a lot of these people might be listening, entrepreneurs, you've got to learn what is your story, what is your quote unquote hero's journey. Not just making it a journey of, like, a lot of people go and tell their stories. Like, have you noticed how when I've told my story on this podcast, like, I'll be talking about boxing, right? But then I'll relate it back to the audience because I want there to be a key takeaway. And then I'll talk about something else, a story, and then I'll relate it back with some actionable advice. Right?
Story arc.
Right? So I give you the insight of how I was feeling in that moment, and I give you so I communicate the value. I give you the feeling because I know without the feeling you can't understand the value. And then I give you the insight, which is the insight that I want to put in your life. But how have I done that? One, because of experience of the game. I've been in the game a long time. I've been around the world. I've seen a bit, right? But why am I telling you this? Because I want you guys as entrepreneurs, if you want to get booked on podcasts and you want to be a good person, you've got to understand where your actionable value is and where your stories are. So again, this comes back to what I said. Understanding of self and that, who am I right now? Where are my insights? Write it out in the journal, get it super clear. And then that allows them to go on and be good guests because they can go, right, here's my story. Here's what I learned. Here's my actionable insight that you can put in your life. Now you're valuable. A lot of the entrepreneurs are not valuable because they just go on and waffle about themselves and give no actionable insights. Yeah. The reason you mentioned the two podcasts you mentioned is because it's actual insights that they've given. Yeah. That's predicated on us as hosts being able to extract those actionable insights. But in order for us to be able to extract them, the other people have got to want to give them. They can't just want to go on their stories. We've both had guests on mutually that have come on the podcast and they just want to waffle on about their old journey and this, that, and the other. But there's nothing, you can't take nothing from that, So it's understand those three metrics and then craft your insights based upon that.
I think it's so valuable. And if we're listening to this, go and look at Frankie's podcast, because you've had, I think, probably one of the best spectrums of guests. So they're high quality, they're brilliant, and you've taken them on a journey where they can give value. Frankie, thank you so much for your time. That was a wicked episode. Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on. And guys, do me a favor, subscribe to his channel, subscribe to all his stuff. Make sure you give him, the reviews on Apple and Spotify as well. It all helps, and help this man get to the next level. If you like these episodes, feel free to subscribe to our Healthy Hustle newsletter below, where you'll get behind the scenes information from our guests, as well as from the studio operator who helps us create these cinematic episodes. It's also full of business advice and tips, and it will help you join the community of healthy entrepreneurs.